Red Dead Redemption 2 has a lot of creepy moments. Dead bodies, cults, serial killers, swamps that feel like they're watching you. You build a tolerance for it pretty fast. And then there's this thing. The man-made mutant, or what most players just end up calling the pigman, is easily one of the most disturbing Easter eggs in the entire game. You find it in an abandoned house west of Van Horn, out in Roanoke Ridge. From outside, it looks like nothing. Just another structure you might ride past without thinking twice. But when you get closer, something already feels off. Every door is boarded up, every window too. And not in the usual "this place is abandoned" way. These boards look intentional, like someone didn't want anyone getting in. Naturally, you try anyway. You kick the doors, you punch the boards. You might even throw dynamite, because this is Red Dead and dynamite solves most problems. Except here, nothing works. The house refuses to open, which is strange because the game almost never does that. That's the first red flag. If you circle the house carefully, and most players don't, you'll notice one detail that's very easy to miss. On the second floor, there's a single broken window. To get there, you have to climb onto a cart parked beside the house, then awkwardly pull yourself up. It doesn't feel like something you were meant to stumble into casually. It feels hidden on purpose. And the moment you vault through that window, the game hits you. The room is dark, cramped, and hanging from the ceiling at the back of the room is something your brain needs a second to process. It looks alive. Most players immediately draw their gun. Some fire without thinking, and if you do shoot it, you'll notice something weird. Ice chips fly off the body. The thing is frozen solid. This is a preserved experiment. The pigment is massive, a stitched-together collection of animal parts. A boar-like head, wings that don't belong, limbs that clearly came from different bodies. It's suspended like a trophy or a prototype waiting for the next step. And then you start noticing the rest of the room. There are other specimens. An alligator with antlers, a bird-like creature with parts that don't match, sketches on the workbench showing measurements, organs, and anatomical planning. If you walk up and inspect the pigman, Arthur makes a sketch of it in his journal, and that's important. The game doesn't do that for set dressing. It only does that when something matters. Then something else happens. If you check your map after leaving, a new point of interest icon appears, which is Rockstar's way of quietly saying, "You're not done here." And just when you think the house is abandoned, you notice one last detail. The fireplace is lit. The fire is actively burning, which means someone was here recently. That's the moment the questions start stacking up. Who built this thing? Why go through all this effort just to leave it behind? And if the creator didn't die here, where did they go? This isn't just a creepy Easter egg, it's a workshop, and possibly a failed attempt at something much bigger. And the game does not explain any of it, not yet. All it does is show you something that should not exist, make sure you notice the details, and then quietly challenge you to follow the trail. And that's where this mystery really begins. Where did the person who built it go? The fireplace answers that for you. Fire does not stay lit by accident. Someone fed it recently, which means the creator walked out recently, and so next we are going to find him. Pull up the map and ask yourself, where would someone like this go? The house sits west of Van Horn, and Van Horn immediately feels like the right kind of place. Not civilized enough to ask questions, not organized enough to notice something strange. A town where people mind their business because everyone has something to hide. When you ride in, Van Horn feels broken. The pier is falling apart. Buildings lean like they're tired of standing. The place is full of drunks, gamblers, and people who look like they gave up halfway through life. If someone wanted to disappear without disappearing, this is where they would do it. Naturally, we start looking around. You walk the docks, you circle the buildings, you listen to conversations. You get into a fist fight almost immediately because this is Van Horn and peace is optional. To blend in, you sit down for poker, lose some money, argue about it, and somehow leave with most of it back. And after all that, nothing, no clues, no whispers, no scientist buying bear hearts in bulk, no madman sketching anatomy in a saloon corner. Van Horn gives you vibes, but no answers. Just like when it feels like a dead end, something small catches your eye as you're about to leave. A poster, tucked between two buildings, almost easy to miss, is a hunting request. It's polite, professional, completely out of place. The poster is from a woman named Mrs. Hobbs, asking hunters to send her perfect animal carcasses so she can create taxidermy pieces for a wildlife art exhibition near Strawberry. And immediately our brain goes, well, that sounds familiar. Animals, preservation, display, a person who works with bodies. This feels like the first real lead. So let's take the request. The process is slow. You hunt specific animals. You make sure they're perfect. You mail them from post offices. For a while, you never meet her. It's just work. Kill, collect, ship. Eventually, after several requests, she sends you a letter, an invitation. Come see her work. When we arrive at her house near Strawberry, she's friendly, polite, proud of what she's made. And when she leads you into her basement, it definitely feels strange at first. The room is full of taxidermy, squirrels playing poker, raccoons playing tennis, birds posed mid-action like they froze during a joke. It's weird, no doubt about it. But as you look closer, something feels off in the wrong way. Mrs. Hobbs doesn't splice animals together. She doesn't combine parts. Every creature here is intact. Original bodies, just posed in unnatural situations. The craftsmanship is odd, but it isn't surgical. There are no sketches of organs, no measurements, no notes about hearts or wings or or wait, no evidence of experimentation. This isn't creation, it's presentation. And that's the moment the theory falls apart. The pigment wasn't arranged. It was built, piece by piece, purposefully, like someone was trying to make something new, not funny, not artistic, not ironic. Mrs. Hobbs is strange, but she's not our person. So after all that hunting, all that effort, all that curiosity, we are right back where we saw it started, which is exactly how a real investigation feels. We followed a lead that made sense. It didn't pan out, and now we have to go back and look again, because somewhere we missed something, and the pigment room is still waiting. After the Mrs. Hobbs lead falls apart, there's really only one option left. We go back to the pigment room and look again, this time assuming we missed something obvious. Because that's usually how these things go. The second time in the room feels different. We are not reacting anymore. We are studying. And when you slow down, you notice something you probably ignored the first time because your brain was busy screaming about the monster. To the right of the pigment, sitting on a table you can't interact with, are two electrical devices. They don't glow or prompt anything. They're just there, quiet, ordinary, which is exactly why they're easy to miss. If you pull out binoculars and zoom in, you can finally read the nameplates. One says Lanik Electric. The other is partially obscured, but the lettering style matches Turner and Sachs. Those aren't random names. They're companies. And more importantly, they're not out here in the woods. They're in Saint Denis. That's the moment the mystery shifts gears. Up until now, this felt like a backwoods horror story. Some isolated lunatic stitching animals together in the wilderness. But electrical manufacturing companies mean funding, infrastructure, and access to technology. This wasn't just madness. It was resourced. So if we want answers, we don't have to stay in Roanoke Ridge and go to Saint Denis. Saint Denis is the opposite of the pigment's shack in every way. Loud, busy, civilized on the surface, and full of secrets underneath. We visit Lanik Electric, walk around, poke where the game lets you poke. Same with Turner and Sachs. Workers everywhere, serious-looking people, and zero interaction. You can't snoop. You can't ask questions. If you start trouble, the whole place turns hostile immediately. These are not the kind of companies that tolerate curiosity. Another dead end. But Saint Denis does what Saint Denis always does. It distracts you just long enough to stumble into something else. Near one of the parks, by the water, you meet a man named Marko Dragic. He introduces himself as a professor and inventor. He's eccentric, confident, and just odd enough to immediately raise suspicion. He's currently testing a remote-controlled boat in the pond and trying to impress potential investors. Naturally, something goes wrong. He asks for help. You take control of the machine, you steer it, you fire torpedoes, you sink model ships while trying not to blow yourself up on mines. It's impressive, and it works. The investors are satisfied. Marko is thrilled. And before you leave, he gives you an address. Come visit my lab, he says. I have bigger inventions. At this point, your curiosity should already be screaming. When you finally travel to Marko Dragic's lab in Doverhill, the game does something very specific. As you approach, the weather turns. Clear skies vanish. Thunder rolls in. Lightning flashes. The atmosphere shifts hard, like the game wants you to understand that whatever you're walking into is not normal. Inside the lab, Marko is exhausted but excited. He explains his latest breakthrough, a robot, one powered by electricity, more specifically by lightning itself. He asks you to help set up conductors outside the lab, but right now our attention is somewhere else. On the right side of the screen, next to the robot, is this equipment. And if you remember the pigment room, it's the same equipment, same layout, same components, same design. Even the placement on the shelves matches. If you compare them side by side, there's no room for doubt. The devices used in the pigment's room were electrical. They were meant to shock the mutant, to stimulate it, to bring it to life. That's when everything clicks. This isn't two mysteries, it's one. Marko Dragic wasn't just trying to create artificial life with metal. Before that, he tried with flesh. Spliced animals, heavy organs, electrical stimulation. The pigment was a prototype. When that failed, he moved on. From meat to machine, same goal, different materials. Once you see the robot and the equipment side by side, the logic becomes uncomfortable but clear. Marko Dragic didn't abandon the pigment because it was too disturbing. He abandoned it because it didn't work. Flesh was unpredictable, heavy, difficult to sustain. He needed organs powerful enough to survive massive electrical shock. That's why the pigment had a bear's heart, why it had wings, extra limbs, and reinforced parts. He wasn't making art. He was trying to build something that could live through electricity. When that failed, he simplified the problem. Metal doesn't rot. Metal doesn't reject electricity. Metal doesn't scream. So he moved on to machines. To push the experiment forward, you help him set up lightning conductors outside the lab. You're literally guiding metal rods into the ground while standing in the middle of a thunderstorm, which feels like a bad idea even by Red Dead standards. Once everything is in place, you flip the switch. Lightning hits, power surges. The robot activates, it moves. 2 steps. Then it collapses. Marko is ecstatic. To him, this is success. He talks about refinement, improvement, scaling. He's already thinking about what comes next. Bigger power, better control, more funding. He doesn't talk like someone experimenting for curiosity anymore. He talks like someone planning production. If you return to the lab later, the tone changes instantly. The storm is gone. The energy is gone, and so is Marco. You find him dead inside the lab, collapsed in a pool of blood. The robot is missing, and the iron door, the one designed to keep things contained, is bent and smashed outward. From the inside, this wasn't a break-in, it was a breakout. On the workbench, you find a note. Marco's plans. He wanted to sell the robot. Mark it. It eventually build more, maybe even an army. That recontextualizes everything. The pigment was an early attempt at creating life for control and profit. Flesh didn't cooperate, so he replaced it. And this time, the creation survived long enough to decide something for itself. Next to Marco's body, you find an electric lantern. It doesn't behave like a normal light. When you turn, the glow changes color. Blue in one direction, orange in another. If you follow the orange glow, it leads you away from the lab. If we follow the trail across roads, wilderness, elevation changes. Step by step, the lantern quietly guiding you forward, and eventually it leads you somewhere cold. At the peak of a snowy mountain near Coulter, you find it, the robot. It's sitting still, overlooking the land below. The lab far in the distance, its birthplace, its prison. It just sits there, slowly losing power. You can hear it speak one word, Papa. If you aim your weapon at it, the crosshair turns red. The game confirms it. This thing is alive. And when the battery finally dies, it doesn't collapse violently. It simply shuts down, quietly, like it chose to stop. At this point, everything lines up. The pigment was Marco Dragic's first attempt at creating life through biological manipulation and electricity. A stitched organism built to withstand shock. When it failed, he abandoned it, preserved it, and moved on. The robot was the second attempt. Cleaner, stronger, more controllable, until it wasn't. The mystery feels unresolved because there's no confession, but it feels complete because the story answers the right question. Not what is this, but why was it made? Rockstar didn't want to give you closure. They wanted you to connect the dots yourself. This is one of Red Dead Redemption 2's best hidden stories because it trusts the player. It lets you discover, doubt, and piece things together. It's a story about obsession, about creation without responsibility, about what happens when curiosity turns into control, and it leaves you with one last uncomfortable thought. If Marco hadn't died, if the robot hadn't escaped, would the pigment have been considered a failure? Or just the first step? Because somewhere in the woods, that frozen creature is still hanging from the ceiling, waiting.